to Deep Sleep Stories. If these stories have helped you through restless nights, please leave a review. Reviews are what help this podcast grow, reach more listeners, and stay alive. Without them, even something meaningful can slowly disappear. So if this show has brought you comfort, that small act truly helps keep it going. Now, settle in, and let's begin.
Welcome to Deep Sleep Stories, where you can set the day down gently and let the night hold you. Tonight, you'll drift into a quiet tale about a lighthouse by the sea and a soft-pawed cat who keeps calm watch over the waves. Settle in now, just as you are. Let your shoulders drop a little, as if a warm blanket has been placed there. Unclench your jaw. Smooth the space between your brows. Feel the surface beneath you supporting your weight without asking anything in return. Breathe in slowly, as though you're sipping a comforting scent from the air, and breathe out, unhurried, letting the exhale carry away whatever doesn't need to follow you into sleep. Again, a soft inhale and a longer, gentler release. In your mind's eye, you can sense the hush of a shoreline at night. Not loud, not dramatic, just the steady, patient rhythm of water meeting stone. A salt-sweet breeze drifts by, cool at first, then familiar. Somewhere far out, a buoy gives a faint, sleepy bell-like tone, and the sound melts back into the dark. There is a lighthouse here, set on a rounded cliff, like a candle placed on a windowsill. Its light is not sharp, not demanding. It turns slowly, painting a pale ribbon over the water, then returning again, as dependable as a heartbeat. The nearby padded steps move in a quiet circle, soft as falling petals. With every breath, you can let yourself float closer to that lighthouse, closer to the calm. You don't have to do anything. You don't have to solve anything. You're simply arriving. And as you arrive, the story will take over, carrying you the rest of the way, like a gentle tide. Now, as the waves continue their slow conversation with the rocks below, the telling eases into a softer distance, and the night begins to unfold on its own. The lighthouse stood at the edge of the world it guarded, an old tower of pale stone, warmed by years of sun and salted by years of spray. It rose from the cliff with the steady confidence of something that had learned patience from the sea itself. Even in darkness, it seemed to glow faintly, as though it held a memory of light within its walls. Around it, the land was simple and quiet. A narrow path curved through short grasses that leaned with the breeze. A few wind-bent shrubs clung close to the ground, their leaves glossy and thick, built for weather. Smooth stones, rounded by time, lay tucked in the soil like sleeping shells. And beyond the cliff's edge, the ocean spread wide and dark, moving in long breaths. The keeper's cottage sat beside the tower, low and sturdy, its windows softly lit. A thin curl of smoke rose from the chimney and disappeared into the night, as if the sky were a great forgiving blanket. Inside, there was warmth and the faint scent of tea quietness that did not feel empty. It felt full of small comforts, full of steady routines. And in the doorway where the light from inside met the cool blue of the outside, a cat sat like a small guardian of thresholds. The cat was not large, but carried herself with the ease of one who belonged. Her fur was a deep, velvety charcoal with faint silver threads that caught the lamp glow when she turned her head. Her whiskers were long and pale, curving outward like delicate reeds. Her eyes were the calm green of sea glass, and in them lived a gentle focus, as though she could hear the ocean's thoughts. Most of all, there were her paws. They were quiet paws, soft paws, paws that moved without hurry and without sound, even on the stone steps and wooden boards that sometimes complained under heavier feet. Her paw pads were plush, like warm velvet, and she seemed to place each step with care, as if blessing the ground with a secret kindness. The keeper called her Lumen, though no one remembered exactly when that name began. It suited her in the way a good name always does, fitting naturally like a scarf worn for years. Lumen had arrived one evening when the wind was restless and the sky had been bruised with storm. She had appeared at the cottage door, soaked and unbothered, as if she'd simply stepped out of the rain for a brief visit and might leave again at any moment. But she hadn't left. She had eaten a saucer of milk and a small piece of fish, then curled herself into the warmest patch of rug and fallen asleep, as if she'd been waiting for that exact spot. In the morning, she'd followed the keeper out to the lighthouse door, her tail held in a gentle curve. When the keeper climbed the spiral stairs, Lumen climbed as well. When the lamp was polished, Lumen watched. When the light was lit at dusk, Lumen sat beside the window and blinked slowly, as if approving. That had been the beginning. After that, she was simply there, part of the lighthouse, the way the salt and wind were part of it. Tonight, the keeper moved about quietly in the cottage, setting a kettle on the stove and turning down the lamp. The work of the day was finished. The lens had been cleaned, the gears checked, the oil measured, the logbook written in tidy lines. Outside, the world was settling into its nightly hush. Lumen slipped out the door with a silence that felt like a kindness. The air met her fur cool and clean. The breeze carried the scent of kelp and far-off rain. Her ears tilted, gathering distant sounds, the slow tumble of waves, the faint brush of grass, the whispery creak of the lighthouse as it held itself upright against time. She padded toward the tower, her paws finding the worn stones of the path. Each step was soft, deliberate, untroubled. She did not rush, because the night itself was unhurried. The beam from the lantern room above swept over her, pale and slow, then moved on, leaving her in darkness again. The rhythm was soothing, like a lullaby made of light. At the base of the lighthouse, the door stood slightly ajar, as it often did on calm nights. Lumen slipped inside. The air within was different, cooler, with a faint mineral scent and the dry, comforting smell of old stone. Her paws made almost no sound on the smooth floor. The spiral staircase rose above her, curving upward like a shell. Lumen began to climb. The stairs were narrow and familiar, each one a quiet friend. The cat moved as though the climb was a simple, graceful dance, her body flowing around the curve. As she ascended, the sounds of the outside shifted. The ocean grew quieter, muffled by thick walls. The wind became a distant sigh. In their place came the soft, mechanical hush of the lighthouse's turning heart, the slow, steady working of gears and weight. Higher up, the air felt lighter and cooler. The tower always held a different kind of night, one touched by height, by distance, by the wide open sky. At last, Lumen reached the lantern room. The great lens stood there, tall and gleaming, catching and bending the light into its slow, revolving sweep. It made the room feel like a delicate cathedral of glass and brass. Outside the windows, the ocean waited, black and shining like a sheet of ink sprinkled with starlight. Lumen circled once and sat near the window, her tail tucked around her paws. She watched the beam stretch across the water. When it passed over the sea, it revealed brief glimmers, foam, ripples, the glint of a distant wave crest. Then it moved on, and the darkness returned, gentle and deep. There were nights when the world felt especially wide, and tonight was one of them. The sky was clear, stars scattered above in quiet clusters. The moon was a pale curve, not quite full, drifting like a thought half remembered. Lumen blinked slowly, then turned her gaze down toward the cliff's edge, where the rocks lay in shadow. Somewhere below, the tide slid in and out with the patience of something that had forever. The water did not hurry. The water did not worry. And Lumen, in her own small way, matched the sea. She stayed a long time in the lantern room, keeping her gentle watch. The beam continued to sweep. The gears continued their soft turning. The world continued to breathe. Eventually, Lumen rose and padded back down the stairs. Her steps were even softer on the descent, her body loose and untroubled. Back at the base of the tower, she paused at the door and looked out. The path curved away toward a small field of grasses, then toward the cliff. The air tasted of salt and clean night. The lighthouse behind her stood steady and bright, its light continuing its slow arc. Lumen set off along the path, moving toward the edge of the land where the world fell away into sea. Near the cliff, there was a low stone wall built long ago to discourage wandering feet from going too near in storms. Tonight, it served as a warm perch, still holding the day's sun in its stones. Lumen hopped up and settled on the wall, her paws tucked beneath her. The wind ruffled her fur. She closed her eyes for a moment and listened. The ocean spoke in a language made of repetition, wave and hush, wave and hush. A soft crash far below, then a drawn-out sigh as water slid back. The rhythm was steady, and because it was steady, it was comforting. After a time, Lumen opened her eyes. At first, she saw only the familiar shapes of night, the dark sea, the starlit sky, the pale line of the horizon. Then she noticed something unusual. Out on the water, not very far from shore, a small glow appeared. It was not the sweeping beam of the lighthouse. It was lower, softer, and it moved in a hesitant way, bobbing with the waves. It looked like a lantern on a tiny boat. Lumen's ears tilted forward. Her body did not tense with alarm, but with quiet attention. The sea carried many things, and the lighthouse was there to guide them. But this light felt personal, like someone holding a candle in their hands. She watched as the glow drifted closer, then paused, then drifted again. A moment later, the faint outline of a small skiff became visible, rocking gently in the dark. A figure sat within it, wrapped in a cloak that fluttered in the breeze. The lantern was set near the bow, casting a warm circle of light over the boat's worn wood. The boat did not feel dangerous, it felt lost, or perhaps simply unsure. Lumen rose. She stepped down from the stone wall and moved along the cliff path with her quiet pause. She did not run, she did not rush, she simply went because sometimes the world asked for small, calm help. Near a narrow inlet below the cliff, where the rocks formed a sheltered pocket, a set of rough steps led down toward a tiny dock. The dock was old, made from weathered boards that smelled of salt and seaweed. It creaked softly under the wind, but it held. Lumen padded down the steps, her paws sure and light. The air grew damp and cool as she descended. The sound of the water became louder, close and present. At the dock, she paused. The skiff was now near enough that she could see the figure clearly. A person, yes, but not one she recognized from the nearby villages. Their face was partly hidden by the cloak's hood, but the posture was gentle, tired, and careful. The boat rocked, nudged by small waves. The figure lifted their head and their gaze found the dock. Their eyes widened slightly when they saw the cat standing there, as though they hadn't expected to be met by such a small guardian. The skiff drifted closer, guided by the current, until it bumped softly against the dock. The figure reached out and caught a rope, looping it around a cleat. Their movements were slow, as if the night itself had seeped into their limbs. For a moment, there was silence, except for the water. Then the figure spoke, their voice soft and rough with travel. "Hello?" they said, as though uncertain whether to address the cat or the lighthouse beyond. Lumen blinked. She remained still, her tail resting lightly behind her. She offered the quiet, steady presence the cat seemed to carry naturally, like a small lantern of calm. The figure exhaled, and their shoulders dropped, as if that calm was something they could borrow. They stepped carefully onto the dock. Their boots were wet, their cloak heavy with mist. They looked up toward the cliff, where the lighthouse beams swept across the sky, then across the sea, then back again. "I followed the light," the figure murmured, more to themselves than to anyone else. "I didn't know if it was real at first." Lumen took a step forward. Her paws made no sound. She glanced toward the steps leading up, then back at the figure, as if to say, "This way." The figure hesitated only a moment, then followed. They climbed the rough steps slowly. Lumen moved ahead of them, pausing at each turn, as if to make sure they didn't lose their balance. Her soft paws led the way, setting a pace that was neither too fast nor too slow. At the top, the wind greeted them again, cool and clean. The field of grasses swayed like a dark ocean of its own. The lighthouse stood close now, its stone pale under the moon's gentle curve. The figure stopped near the base of the tower and looked up, their face partly revealed in the sweep of light. They were young, perhaps, or perhaps simply worn in a way that made age hard to tell. Their eyes held a kind of wonder, like someone stepping into a story they had once heard as a child. Lumen sat for a moment, her paws neatly together. The figure looked down at her. "You live here?" they said softly. Lumen blinked once, slow and deliberate. The figure smiled, a small curve that looked like relief. They reached out a hand, then paused, as though asking permission even from a cat. Lumen leaned forward slightly, just enough to brush her whiskers against the offered fingers. The touch was light, almost imaginary, but it seemed to steady the stranger even more. From inside the cottage, a lamp glow brightened. The keeper had noticed movement, perhaps. Or perhaps he had simply woken and felt the night shift. The cottage door opened. The keeper stepped out, wrapped in a thick sweater, his hair tousled by sleep. He looked down the path, and his eyes found the figure standing there. He did not shout. He did not rush. He simply lifted a hand in greeting, as though visitors arriving in the night were unusual but not alarming. "Evening," the keeper called, his voice calm. "Are you all right?" The figure nodded slowly. "I think so," they said. I drifted closer than I meant to. The current carried me. I saw the light." "Well," the keeper said, warmth entering his tone, "the light does its job then. Come in. You look chilled." The figure hesitated again, but the keeper's presence was steady, like the lighthouse itself, and Lumen's soft paws were already moving toward the cottage door, as though it were the most natural thing in the world to bring someone inside. The figure followed. Inside the cottage, warmth gathered like a gentle embrace. The air smelled of tea and a small wood fire that had been banked low but still held a glow. The keeper moved with quiet efficiency, setting another kettle on the stove, placing a blanket over the back of a chair. "Sit," he said kindly. "You can warm up." The figure sat, shoulders still hunched with cold. Lumen approached and jumped lightly onto a nearby stool, then onto the figure's lap with perfect certainty, as though she had decided that this was where she belonged for the moment. The figure gasped softly in surprise, then laughed in a way that sounded like a cracked bell, finally ringing true. Their hands hovered, unsure. Lumen settled, her body a warm weight. Her paws kneaded once, then rested soft and still. The figure slowly placed their hands on her fur, and their fingers sank into the plush warmth, as though into a comfort they hadn't realized they needed. The keeper watched, amused. "She's a good one," he said. "Keeps the place peaceful." The figure stroked Lumen's head, and their breathing began to slow. Their shoulders eased. their eyes half closed for a moment, as though the simple act of touching a calm creature was enough to remind them how to be calm themselves. The kettle began to sing. The keeper poured hot water into mugs, the steam rising in slow curls. He added tea leaves and a spoon of honey. He placed a mug in front of the figure. "Drink," he said. The figure wrapped their hands around the mug, letting the heat seep into their fingers. They took a small sip, then another. Color returned to their face faintly. For a while they spoke quietly, the way people speak at night when the world is asleep. The figure explained that they had been traveling along the coast, following old paths, seeking something they couldn't quite name. The sea had called to them not with danger, but with a kind of longing. They had taken the skiff out to watch the moonlight on the water, and the current had pulled them farther than expected. "I wasn't afraid," they admitted, voice low. "Not exactly, but I felt small, like the sea could forget I was there." The keeper nodded, stirring his tea. "The sea is wide," he said. "It doesn't mean to be cruel, it's just enormous. And we are small. That's why we make lights." Lumen's paws rested on the figure's leg, soft and warm. The figure looked down at her, and their gaze softened. "She found me," the figure said. The keeper smiled. "She finds what she needs to find." Outside, the lighthouse beam continued to sweep. The cottage windows caught it briefly, brightening, then dimming again, like a slow blink. The sound of the wind around the eaves was gentle, a quiet brush. Inside, the fire shifted softly, settling deeper into its coals. Time moved in a dreamy way, stretching and smoothing. The figure grew quieter, their words trailing off into contented silence. Their hands continued to stroke Lumen's fur, and Lumen purred, the sound deep and steady like a small engine of comfort. At last the keeper stood. "You can sleep here," he said. "There's a spare room. It's simple but warm." The figure looked up, surprised. "I don't want to trouble you." "It's no trouble," the keeper replied. "A lighthouse is for those who need it. That includes land as well as sea." The figure's eyes shone faintly in the lamplight, as if gratitude was too large to fit into words. They nodded, and the keeper led them down a small hallway to a room with a narrow bed and a thick quilt. A small window looked out toward the tower, where the light could be seen sweeping through the night. Lumen hopped down from the figure's lap and padded into the room ahead of them. She jumped onto the bed and turned in a slow circle, then sat, her tail wrapped around her paws, as if she were demonstrating exactly how to rest. The figure smiled, the expression soft and sleepy now. They removed their cloak and boots, then lay down under the quilt. The mattress creaked faintly, then settled. The room was cool, but not cold, and the quilt held warmth like a held secret. Lumen approached and stepped lightly onto the bed. Her paws were careful, placing weight gently, as though she knew that sleep was delicate. She walked to the figure's side and curled up near their chest, a small, living warmth. Her purr began again, slow and steady. The figure's breathing matched it without effort. In and out, like tide and hush. their eyes closed, their face relaxed. Outside, the lighthouse continued to turn, its beams sliding across the sea, across the cliff, across the cottage, then away again. Each sweep felt like a reassurance. Each return felt like a promise kept. In the quiet hours, the keeper returned to his own room, leaving the house in peaceful stillness. The fire burned low. The mugs sat cooling on the table. The wind moved around the cottage like a gentle hand smoothing fabric. Lumen remained with the traveler, her soft paws tucked in, her purr a calm thread stitching the night together. And something subtle shifted, as if the lighthouse itself had noticed the presence of someone new and welcomed them into its circle of light. Later, when the traveler slept deeply, the dreams that came were not sharp or strange. They were gentle dreams full of soft edges and quiet glimmers. In those dreams, the traveler walked along the shore at dawn, when the sky was pale and the sea was silver. Lumen walked beside them, her paws leaving no prints, as though she moved not on sand but on the air itself. The lighthouse stood behind them, tall and kind, its light fading as daylight grew. Satisfied with its night's work, they came to a stretch of rocks where tide pools held tiny galaxies of water. Sea stars clung to stone. Small crabs hid under shadows. The traveler leaned close, watching, and felt wonder settle in their chest like a warm stone. Lumen placed a paw gently on the traveler's hand, as if to say, "Slow down. Look. Listen. Let the world be what it is." They sat together, traveler and cat, and listened to the sea's steady breath. In another dream, the traveler stood in the lantern room at the top of the lighthouse, the great lens towering above. The world outside was a circle of darkness and stars. The traveler watched the beam sweep, and as it moved, it illuminated not only water but something else. Memories, perhaps, or thoughts that had been drifting unseen. The beam touched a memory of laughter, and it glowed briefly, then faded. It touched a worry, and the worry softened, shrinking into something small and manageable. It touched a hope, and the hope warmed like an ember. Lumen sat beside the traveler, her paws tucked, her eyes reflecting the rotating light. In the dream, her paws seemed even softer, as though they were made of moonlight and velvet. When she stood, she moved with a quiet grace, and wherever she stepped, the floor felt warmer. The traveler realized that the lighthouse did not only guide boats, it guided hearts. It guided minds. It offered a steady rhythm in a world that could feel too wide. And the cat, with her soft paws, was part of that guidance. She was a gentle anchor, a reminder of small comforts, a keeper of calm. The traveler slept on, the dreams flowing like water. Outside, the night deepened. The stars shifted slowly. The tide turned. At some point in the early hours, a faint mist drifted in from the sea and wrapped itself around the lighthouse cliff. The beam of light cut through it in pale arcs, making the world feel even more dreamy, as though the land and sea were inside a quiet bubble. The mist softened all edges. The grasses became shadowy sways. The rocks below became gentle shapes. The horizon disappeared, and the sea seemed endless, not frightening but mysterious in a peaceful way. In the cottage, the traveler turned slightly in sleep, pulling the quilt closer. Lumen adjusted with them, her paws moving so softly they barely disturbed the fabric. Her purr continued, steady as ever. In the lantern room above, the lens continued its slow rotation, the gears working with patient ease. The lighthouse held its watch, unwavering. There was no hurry anywhere, no demand. Only the steady movement of things that knew their purpose. The sea breathing, the light turning, the cat purring. When morning finally began to arrive, it did so quietly, like a shy visitor. The sky lightened at the edges, turning from deep blue to a softer shade, then to a pale gray, touched with rose. The mist thinned and drifted away, leaving the cliff clear again. The lighthouse beam grew faint against the coming day. Then finally, with a last slow sweep, it dimmed. The lantern room settled into stillness, as if exhaling after a long night. In the cottage, the travelers stirred. Their eyes opened slowly. For a moment they lay still, listening. The world felt different now, lighter, gentler, as though the night had washed something clean. Lumen was still there, curled beside them, her paws tucked under her chest. Her eyes were half open, calm and watchful. She blinked slowly when the traveler looked at her, as if greeting them without words. The traveler smiled. They reached out and touched one of Lumen's paws with a fingertip, marveling at how soft it was, how warm. The paw did not pull away. It rested there, trusting, like a small promise. The traveler sat up and looked out the window. The sea was visible again, now a soft blue-gray, waves glimmering with morning light. The lighthouse stood tall beside the cottage, quiet now, resting. They felt in a way that was hard to explain, as though they had been found. Not only found by the lighthouse, but found by calm itself. The keeper knocked softly and entered with a tray. Fresh tea, a small plate of bread, a bit of jam. He smiled when he saw the traveler awake. "Morning," he said gently. "How do you feel?" The traveler took a breath. It felt deep and easy. "Better," they said, and meant it. Lumen hopped off the bed and padded to the tray, sniffing politely, then turning away, uninterested in bread, but interested in being present. She wove around the traveler's ankles, her tail brushing like a soft ribbon, grounding them in the morning. The keeper looked out toward the sea. "The tide's calm," he said. "If you want, you can set off again later, or you can stay a while. No one rushes here." The traveler held their mug and watched the steam rise. They didn't answer right away. They simply let the warmth settle in their hands and chest. The idea of not rushing felt like a gift. Outside, gulls called softly, not harshly, just as part of the morning. The grasses moved with a mild breeze. The world felt wide, yes, but also friendly. Lumen sat in a patch of sunlight that had begun to slip across the floor. She tucked her paws beneath her and closed her eyes halfway, purring faintly as though the day was simply another gentle wave. And whether the traveler stayed for one morning or many, whether they went on or paused longer, the lighthouse would remain. The light would return at dusk. The sea would keep breathing. And Lumen, with her soft paws, would continue to move through the quiet spaces, carrying calm wherever she stepped. Now, as the story begins to soften and fade, the lighthouse can grow distant again, like a peaceful image seen through half-closed eyes. The sea is still breathing, wave and hush, wave and hush. The light is turning in slow circles, steady and kind. And somewhere, a small cat curls into warmth, paws tucked in, purr deep and soothing. Let your own breathing follow that same gentle rhythm, in and out, slow and easy. Nothing to do now, nothing to hold, only rest. May your thoughts drift like mist over calm water, thinning, easing, disappearing into sleep. Good night, dear traveler. Sleep well.